It was an ordinary weekday. People were walking home, cars passed by, conversations blended into background noise. And then in seconds, everything changed. Across Lincolnshire, violence didn't arrive with warnings or dramatic buildups. It appeared suddenly, in daylight, behind closed doors on quiet streets, leaving behind blood, shock, and lives that could never be put back together. These are not stories of criminal masterminds. They are stories of moments where anger, addiction, recklessness, or silence crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Welcome back to my. Every case you're about to hear is real, verified, and permanently etched into the communities where they happened. We begin with a killing that unfolded in broad daylight, watched by strangers who could do nothing but freeze. Case 1, Victor Zeglov's, November 11th, 2024, Green Lane, Spalding, Lincolnshire. Early afternoon, busy streets, witnesses everywhere. Victor Zeglov's was 33 years old, a Latvian national living in Spalding. He struggled with alcohol and mental health issues and shared a home with the man who trusted him most, Vadim Mizarevskis, aged 45. Vadim was calm, nonviolent, loyal. Friends described him as the kind of man who protected others, someone who treated Victor like a brother. On that afternoon, the two men walked together through Spalding town center. They were drinking, laughing, talking. Nothing appeared unusual. Near the junction of Green Lane and St. Thomas Road, an unrelated argument broke out between Victor and a third man. Vadim stepped in not to fight, but to calm things down. Moments later, the third man punched Victor, knocking him to the ground, and then walked away. What happened next shocked everyone watching. Instead of letting it go, Victor turned his rage toward the one person who had tried to protect him. He dragged Vadim into the road, punched him, struck him with a slider shoe, forced him against railings. Vadim did not fight back. Victor then pulled a bottle of rum from Vadim's pocket, smashed it, paused, just long enough for witnesses to realize something was terribly wrong, and forced the broken glass into Vadim's neck. The jugular vein was severed. Blood flooded the road as people screamed and ran for help. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but it was already over. Vadim Mizarevskis was pronounced dead at the scene. Victor remained there, visibly distressed, trying to stop the bleeding with his own clothes. When police detained him, he was heard saying, "It's my fault." CCTV captured almost the entire incident. Witnesses were clear. Victor acted alone after the third man left. At Lincoln Crown Court, Victor Zeglov's pleaded guilty to murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 11 years and 306 days. Vadim's family described him as peaceful, kind, and irreplaceable. This case stands as a brutal reminder. Alcohol can turn moments into tragedies. Those who step in to protect others can become victims. Public violence scars entire communities, not just families. But this was not the only life destroyed that year. Case 2, Owen Blades, June 13th, 2024, Portland Street, Lincoln. This violence didn't happen in public. There were no witnesses, no screams heard by passers-by. Owen Blades was 27 years old, recently released from prison, known to police. No job, no stability, heavy drinking, cocaine use. Just 2 days after his release from HMP Lincoln, he began spiraling. That morning, he stole food from a supermarket. Later, he assaulted staff at an amusement arcade after being challenged about drinking alcohol on the premises. Then sometime later that day, he walked into a quiet home on Portland Street. Inside lived John Connolly, aged 69, a retired carer. Gentle, caring, alone. There were no signs of forced entry. Investigators believe John opened the door himself. Minutes later, Owen Blades attacked him. Using a large stiletto-style knife purchased the day before, Blades stabbed John at least 18 times, including fatal wounds to the neck. John Connolly died alone in his armchair. Blades left the house and told no one what he had done. 5 days passed. John's family became worried when they couldn't reach him. When they entered the house on June 18th, they found his body. Police immediately launched a major investigation. CCTV, forensic evidence, and blood traces all led back to Blades. The knife matched the wounds. His movements placed him at the scene. When confronted, Blades pleaded guilty. At Lincoln Crown Court, the judge described the killing as predatory and devastating. Owen Blades received a life sentence, with a minimum term of 35 years. John Connolly's family described him as selfless and loving, a man who spent his life caring for others, only to die at the hands of a stranger. This case shows how violence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it happens quietly, behind a door that should never have been opened. Case 3. The Wootton Burglary Killing. September 11, 2022, Wootton, North Lincolnshire. This wasn't a sudden argument. This wasn't alcohol-fueled chaos. This was planned. Days before the attack, 6 men began preparing for what they believed would be an easy burglary. They shared messages, stole a car, and discussed a target they believed had drugs and cash inside his home. The man they targeted was Ian Staves, 44 years old, a self-employed car sprayer who lived alone in Wootton. He had no connection to the group and no idea what was coming. The organizer was Nicholas Jameson, Claire, aged 34. Alongside him were Aaron Windas, Celestino Furtado, James Smith, Patrick Joseph Smith, and Bobby Gibson. Their ages ranged from late teens to early 40s. Their motive was simple: money and drugs. On the evening of September 11th, the group crossed the Humber Bridge in convoy, 1 vehicle stolen, 1 belonging to St. Clair. CCTV later tracked their journey minute by minute. Between 10:26 and 10:52 p.m., they entered Ian Staves's home. What followed was brutal. Ian was punched, kicked, and stamped on. One attacker covered his mouth to stop him calling for help. Pressure was applied to his neck. He was restrained, overwhelmed, and violently assaulted in his own living room. A post-mortem later confirmed manual strangulation and a fractured neck. The group fled, leaving Ian dying on the floor. No one called for help. He was found the next day by a concerned friend. Police launched a massive investigation. CCTV, phone records, vehicle tracking, forensic evidence. Messages showed the group communicating before and after the killing. Every movement was traced. At Bradford Crown Court, 5 men were convicted of manslaughter and conspiracy to burgle. 1 was convicted of conspiracy alone. Sentences ranged from 10 to 26 years. Nicholas St. Clair, identified as the leader, received 24 years. Ian's family described the killing as senseless, a life taken not because of hatred, but because a group decided someone else's home was worth more than his life. This case proves something chilling. Violence doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from planning. Case 4. Mark Glasgow, the innocent peacemaker. June 14, 2024, Lincoln. Mark Glasgow was not involved in drugs. He was not involved in debt. He wasn't even meant to be part of the conflict. He was 46 years old, gentle, quiet, and known for helping others. On that afternoon, Mark accompanied a female friend to a flat on Frank Swaby Court. She owed £100 related to drugs and feared the situation might turn violent. Mark came only to support her and calm things down. Inside the flat were Jordan Hartley, angry and threatening violence, along with Jason Froh and Louis Giles. Minutes after Hartley arrived, without warning, he punched Mark once, a powerful blow, and threw him to the floor. Mark's head struck the ground. He did not fight back. He couldn't. He suffered a catastrophic brain injury and fractured ribs. Instead of calling an ambulance, the men dragged Mark outside and left him slumped against garage doors like he didn't matter. 30 minutes later, a neighbor found him and called police. Mark was taken to hospital. 2 days later, he died. Investigators uncovered Hartley's threatening messages sent earlier that day. CCTV and forensic evidence confirmed the assault happened inside the flat. At Lincoln Crown Court, all 3 men pleaded guilty to manslaughter. Jordan Hartley, 7 years, 6 months. Jason Froh, 6 years, 9 months. Louis Giles, 6 years, 9 months. Mark's family described him as selfless, a man who lost his life simply for trying to help someone else. This case shows how quickly violence can punish the innocent, and how indifference after an assault can be just as deadly as the blow itself. Case 5. Max Skidmore, 1 punch, 1 death. December 8, 2024, Lincoln. It was supposed to be a birthday celebration. Max Skidmore, 37, spent the day drinking across Lincoln. He also took cocaine and cannabis. Despite being intoxicated, he drove his van through the city trying to find his girlfriend. At around 11 p.m. on Carhome Road, he parked and encountered Eddie Roberts, 55 years old, a stranger walking home quietly after an evening with friends. There was no argument, no provocation. As Eddie turned toward him, Skidmore punched him once, a trained boxer delivering a powerful blow to the chin. Eddie fell instantly. His head struck the ground. He never regained consciousness. Bystanders called emergency services, but the damage was catastrophic. Eddie died shortly afterward from a fatal head injury. CCTV showed Skidmore's aggressive behavior earlier that evening. Toxicology confirmed he was over 2.5 times the legal alcohol limit, with drugs in his system. At court, forensic evidence proved it was a punch, not a slap, as Skidmore claimed. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 6 years and 8 months, with an extended license. Eddie's family described him as dependable, kind, and deeply loved. One punch, one moment of ego and intoxication, one life gone forever. None of these stories began with murder. They began with drinking, impatience, threats ignored, violence normalized, silence where help should have been called. Every case you've heard today involved ordinary moments, moments where a different choice could have changed everything. These weren't monsters hiding in the shadows. They were people who crossed a line they could never step back from. If you want to understand how everyday situations turn into irreversible tragedies, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every case we cover is real, verified, and told to remind, not to sensationalize. And now we want to hear from you. Are there crimes in your community that deserve to be remembered? Stories that shocked your town or were quietly forgotten? Leave your suggestions in the comments, because the next story we tell might be closer than you think.